talk about clipping masks. So what is a clipping mask? Well, it's a shape called a clipping path that masks any object below it so that only what's inside of the clipping path is visible. So anytime you want to take a photograph or an illustration or a shape that you've drawn and mask it by another shape, for example, if I wanted to take this photograph and have this photograph inside of a circle, or maybe show only his face inside of a square or a triangle, I could actually add a mask on top of this where only what I would see inside of the mask would be visible and everything else I wouldn't see. This is a really helpful tool when you want to put one object inside of another shape or mask it inside of a shape. So how do you do that? Well, you need two things. You need the actual object that you're going to mask, which could be a shape or a photograph or a vector illustration or whatever the case may be. And then you need the actual clipping path or the thing or the shape that you're going to actually mask these things with. So for example, if I wanted to take this circle, but I wanted to actually mask it into a star, I'm going to draw my clipping path. I'm going to draw a star. It doesn't matter what color the clipping path is because it's only there to cut this shape into this one. So it doesn't matter if the star is the same color, no color, a different color. As long as you can see it and it's visible to you, then you can use it. Now the key here is that the clipping path needs to be on top of the shape that you want to mask. So it needs to be on top of the shape that you want to mask. So I basically want to get this circle into this star. And so now that I have this star on top, the clipping path on top of the circle, I'm going to select both of these objects. So the star and the circle, I'm going to right click and I'm just going to hit make clipping mask. And now that circle is literally inside of this star, this mask that I just created. Let's try it again. Let's say I wanted to clip this guy into a circle. So I can draw a circle. Let's say I just wanted a headshot. So I can draw the circle where I want the mask to be. Oops. This is the clipping path, and it has to be on top of the actual object. If it's not on top, then you can arrange it that way. Just right click it, say arrange, and bring to front, and it'll be on top. Doesn't matter what color the clipping path is, but now I'm going to select both the clipping path and the object below it. You can hold down shift to do that. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to say make clipping mask. And now he is inside of this circle. Now it doesn't mean that the rest of the photo is gone. It's actually still there. It's just clipped inside of this circle. So if I was to take my direct selection tool and click inside here, I can see the bounding box of the actual photo. That means that that photo really is still there. It's just clipped inside of this circle. If I actually select the photo with my direct selection tool, I can move it around inside of that clipping mask. I can also even scale it inside of that clipping mask. And I have to use my direct selection tool, the white arrow, to first select that photo inside of the clipping mask. Then I can go back to my black arrow, the selection tool, to grab those handles and to scale the photo inside the mask. So it's very important to switch between the selection tool, the black arrow, and the white arrow, the direct selection tool, because the white arrow, the direct selection tool, actually helps you to select directly into a group or a clipping mask to select that object that you want, not the whole entire thing. We can even see proof of this here in the layers panel. If I pull out the layers panel and I drop down the panel, I can see this first layer here inside of the sub layers is showing my clipping mask. And I have the clipping path here, which is the circle that I drew. And then I have the actual photograph here under it, which is the clipping object. So you can actually select even the path of that clipping path, and you can change the stroke of that. You can actually add a stroke color to that clipping mask. And then again here, I can take this vector illustration and I can mask this whole thing as well. So I can say take a polygon, maybe I'll do a triangle, and I will position it where I want it to go. It doesn't matter what color my clipping path is as long as I can see it. And it's on top of the object that I want to mask. Then I'm going to select the whole entire thing, right click, and I'm going to say make clipping mask. And now that illustration is masked inside of this triangle. Now another way I could have done that is I could go to Object, Clipping Mask, and Make. I could do it that way as well. Or I can hit Command 7. So there's many different ways I can do it. I can use a keyboard shortcut, I can use the actual object menu, or I can just right click the shapes and mask that way. And as you can see inside, that vector illustration is still there. It's just masked inside of this clipping path. And I can use my direct selection tool, the white arrow, to click inside of the actual path to change the colors of the elements inside of the path once it's been clipped. Now what happens if I want to actually remove this clipping mask? Maybe I don't want it anymore. Well, I can just select the whole entire thing with the black selection arrow. I can right click and I can say release clipping path. And once I release it, it will give me back not only the shape that I drew, here's that triangle that I drew as a clipping path, but also the entire vector shape behind it. If I don't want this triangle anymore, this mask, I can just delete it. So one thing to remember about a clipping mask, a way you can think about it, is let's think about the clipping path as a cookie cutter and the object that you want to mask as the cookie dough. So the cookie cutter always has to go on top of the actual dough that you want to make the shape, mold the shape out of. So same thing with the clipping mask. You must first have the cookie dough at the bottom, which is whichever shape or photograph or vector object that you want to mask. And then you have to have that cookie cutter, which is the clipping mask path, the shape that you want. You put that on top, and then you select both items, and then you make the clipping mask. And that's kind of your final output, or the cookie that you have now framed inside of this shape. So practice your clipping mask and see what all kinds of interesting shapes that you can create. You can even mask a clipping mask. You can even create a mask using your own unique shapes that you draw. I can even mask this inside of this object and nest a mask inside of a mask. So you can do a lot, you just have to practice and you will make progress. All right, see you in the next one.